Hello again, it's me Mandala, and today I'm back with another open world buildcraft video. This time we're taking a look at a new build that just became a lot stronger with the recent January 30th balance update, and that's going to be Untamed Ranger. And so, with that update, they made a couple changes to buff the power coefficients of all the greatsword skills, and they made some changes to Untamed with Let Loose to let this skill give might on Unleash Ambush. And so a new build kind of popped out of the woodwork that I think is very strong, very fun. I've had a lot of trouble finding a Ranger build that I really liked. I've tested like 4 different Condi builds that were ultimately really strong, but that I didn't find very fun, and so I just ignored them. But this build is actually fun and very interesting, and so I wanted to share it. So this is a Power Untamed Ranger build for open world, and you guessed it, it uses Celestial gear. So let's get into the gear and traits and how this build works and why I like it so much. So the first thing to know is, like I said, it uses all Celestial gear. So you have Celestial armor, Celestial weapons, celestial trinkets, right? And then in the armor for your runes, I'm using Superior Rune of the Pack, which gives us power, boon duration, and some extra precision. And then for the weapons, I'm using Sword, Axe, and then Greatsword. And both weapon sets are running Superior Sigil of Strength and Superior Sigil of Accuracy. And then for the relic, I'm running Relic of the Thief, which is just a pretty typical power relic to boost our power damage. And so the way this build works is it's a power build, but it uses Celestial because, like I've said in a lot of previous videos, Celestial stats just give you a good, well-rounded base to put a lot of powerful enhancements onto your character to do more damage that inevitably end up trumping Berserker gear. And so the way this works is what we're trying to achieve with all these different runes and stuff and sigils and trait lines is, for this build we're hitting 50% crit strike chance, because if we go to our traits, um, in this first trait line, skirmishing, with Vicious Quarry, we're getting an extra 15% crit chance from Fury, so that's 40% crit chance from Fury, which puts us at 90% crit chance when we have Fury. And then this minor trait, Hunter's Tactics, gives us that last 10%, and so now we're at at crit cap in full Selly gear, uh, and we have access to permanent Fury. So quickly, I'm going to go through the traits. The first line is the skirmishing line, like I just said, and you have Tailwind, which will give you permanent swiftness because we have all this boon duration. You have Sharpened Edges, which is just the best of these three, which aren't that useful. You could take Primal Reflexes if you feel like you're going to be dodging a lot and you want more vigor, but because we're running Selly gear, we actually do get decent value from Sharpened Edges here for critting, and our crit supply bleed. The next minor is Furious Grip, so when we weapon swap, we get Fury, and this is where a lot of our Fury is coming from. For our second trait line, our second row column trait, we're taking Strider Strength. So our pet gains power, and we gain power. We gain additional power while wielding a sword, and we do have sword on one of our weapon sets. And then successfully evading an attack grants might. That part, it's not going to help us that much, but it is a nice little bonus. And like I said, Hunter's Tactics. So when we flank or attack a defiant enemy, we get 15% strike damage increase, and we get 10% crit chance. And so, for the most part, flanking is not a very fun mechanic, in my opinion, but the reality is, when you need to be doing the extra damage, where you need this Hunter's Tactics to be procced all the time, you probably are fighting a defiant foe, and if you're not, you can just do your best to try to flank. You don't have to worry about it if you don't want to. This build actually does a lot of damage, so we don't need to think about it too much if we don't want to. And then lastly, in the skirmishing line, we have Vicious Quarry. So Fury grants Ferocity and additional increased crit chance, right, like I said, and when struck while below the health threshold, gain Fury. So this build is plentiful on Fury. We'll have permanent Fury as long as we continue to use our skills and abilities and weapon swap. And so this really helps us leverage the fact that we are at a lower crit chance baseline because we're not running Berserker gear or Assassin's gear. We're running Selly gear, and so we need that little extra bit of precision slash crit chance, and this gets us up to the cap. When we take into account that we're running all the Selly gear plus the accuracy sigil plus the superior rune of the pact, which gives us precision, and then I'm also running the birthday cake food, which gives us a little bit more extra precision. And so that hits me right above the cap, right? We only need 50%, and this gives us 50.2, so we're right at the cap. One sec. Okay, I'm back. Now for the second line is we're taking Beast Mastery, and so this line helps us flesh out, give us more power damage, and it buffs our pet in a lot of nice ways. And so the first minor is Pack Alpha, so our pet gains attributes, and our pet skills gain reduced recharge, which is a nice little buff. Then next up is Potent Ally, and so when we crit, we give our pet might, and when our pet crits, it gives us might, which is the more important thing, and we'll talk about that more in a second. For the second minor in this line, you have Loud Whistle. So while your health is above the threshold, your pet deals increased strike damage, which is nice because we're a power build. Your pet swap gains reduced recharge as well, which is good. This build is not really about pet swapping for the most part, but it is just valuable utility. For the next trait, we have Two-Handed Training. So our Greatsword and Spear skills deal more damage, and we are running Greatsword on our bar, so that's nice. And then gain Fury when you disable foe. So again, like I said, we have Fury from a lot of places on this build. And so like when we use Hilt Bash, that'll give us Fury. Next up is Pet's Prowess. So your pet moves faster and deals more damage on critical hits. So pet gains plus 300 ferocity, 30% move speed. Pretty nice. Our pet is going to be doing damage in this build, so that's a good thing to have. And then lastly in the Beast Mastery line is Honed Axes. So you and your pet gain ferocity, so we have baseline ferocity. Axe skills gain reduced recharge, right? And we are running axe on our bar as a offhand in our second weapon set, so that's nice. And you gain additional ferocity while wielding an axe. So you can start to see the synergies with our weapons coming in these three skills: Strider Strength, Two-Handed Training, and Honed Axes. We're really going in on buffing all our weapon strengths and all our weapons through our trait lines, and the synergy of this works really well because we're not actually giving up anything as a power DPS by taking these lines, because these are the best lines for us to take on this build anyway, which is super nice, which is why this build is so strong. And so lastly is the Untamed line, and so Untamed is really weird. It's a spec that's gone through a lot of different iterations, but this most recent iteration really works super well for open world. So if you're looking at like the general consensus to these greatsword buffs from this current patch, you might see people say that like, oh, this doesn't really matter because it's still not doing as much damage as sword axe. And so a lot of people who mainly focus on instance content aren't that excited about these greatsword buffs. But on Untamed, where we also got this buff to Let Loose, which allows our ambush skills to give us might as well as quickness, you'll start to see how these buffs synergize really well together. And so we're going to end up with a build that has permanent quickness, permanent 25 stacks of might, permanent fury, and does really good damage in a tanky gear set. And so lastly, I'm going to go through and explain the Untamed line, and then I'll demo how this build works. So firstly, something to be aware about the Untamed is the mechanics of the class, which is this Unleashed Power mechanic. And so you can see on my bar here, this skill Unleash. And so you can swap between unleashing your pet, which gives you these three Untamed profession skills, right, which you can use on your pet. And then you can also swap back to unleashing yourself with the same skill. And this, when you do this on certain intervals, it gives access to this Unleashed Ambush skill. And that skill is our primary tool to generate boons and damage and healing on this build. So quickly back to the trait line. We'll go through the trait line first, and here, just one sec. 1 second, then we'll go through this trait line. Okay, I'm back again. Alright, so like I said, the first thing is the profession mechanic, which is unleashed power. So gain access to cantrips and unleash. While your pet is unleashed, its skills are replaced with larger area of effect skills, once per interval. Unleashed ambush skill becomes available for a short period of time after you unleash. This says 9-second cooldown, right? You can see it on the tooltip here in the top right of unleashed power. And then if you were to right click this, you could see all of the unleashed skills for all the weapons. So like every time I right click this, you'll see mouse 2, right? Show more info. Sorry, excuse me. Um, and you can see all the different unleashed skills for all the different weapons. And so this is the same mechanic as Mirage ambushes, and it's also very similar to Thief stealth attacks. And it can be a kind of tricky mechanic to interact with if you're new to the game, but I'll explain it a little bit when I start demoing the build. So it's not as tricky as it seems, and it's actually got a really helpful uh, icon on your bar that'll help you determine when you need to be using this skill in combat. So next up in the straight line is Blinding Outburst. So this buffs our one skill, our F1, in our pet unleash and makes it do more damage. It also applies blind, and then unleashed ambush skills do more damage, right? So you can start to see where all the synergies are coming together into making this build do a lot of damage. But yeah, this is just the best of these three for a power build. Next up is Natural Fortitude. So we gain base vitality 240, which is super nice. Makes us really tanky, as you can see with my tier 10 Jadebot core. We're at 28.4 health, and so that's pretty high for a medium armor class that doesn't have the highest health in the game. So pretty good. Uh, Also, this lets our Unleash Ambush skills siphon health when they hit. So this is a passive, so this was going to happen no matter what you did. As long as you're playing Untamed, this is active, so we didn't actually choose this, but when we do this, our Unleashed Ambush skills, right, so my pet is unleashed, right, when I unleash myself, I'll gain access to this ambush skill, right? This skill does life siphon damage and healing, and you can see that when you hover over the skill. You can see Savage Slash, Unleashed Ambush, and it'll tell you how much damage you're doing from the life siphon, uh, how much damage you're doing from the first how much healing you're doing from the first hit of the life siphon, and the additional hit healing, which you can see all that in blue on the tooltip there of the bottom tooltip, where you can see the unleash skill. Right. Let's see. Is there anything else in this one? Siphon healing. Yeah, and so it's just reduced siphon healing from additional targets. So next up, we're taking enhancing impact, and so this is where we're going to round out our quickness uptime by letting our CC skills, when we are unleashed, generate quickness. And so this is going to help us keep topped off because we're not quite at the max cap with just let loose here, and so this helps round out that quickness for us. And that's really the only reason we're taking this skill, and because we don't actually give up that much on a power build by taking it versus these others, because this is like the utility line, the utility column of this trait. So like Cleansing Unleash, just remove conditions when you and your pet unleash, 10-second cooldown. And then Corrupting Vines, Rending Vines converts boons. So this is our F2 in our pet unleash. This is a boon corrupt if we take this this line. So we did this, boons converted to conditions 3. But that's not going to be. We really do want this enhancing impact because we do want to have that comfortable quickness uptime to keep the build feeling fluid and fast-paced. And so the next skill is Vow of the Untamed. Your outgoing strike damage is increased while you are unleashed. So again, right now my pet is unleashed. So the way to tell is when your pet is unleashed, it has these green Untamed abilities here on the F1 through 3, and also you'll see that you have pet unleashed on your bar here. And this skill, your unleash toggle, will show the ranger instead of the pet, which means that when we press it, we switch back to the ranger, And so now that we're on the Ranger, right, we got our Unleash Ambush skill, and it says we are unleashed, right, which is the human face here on the skill bar. And then this becomes Unleash Pet, and you see our pet skills return to the baseline pet skills. Yep. All right. And so like I said, this does extra damage if you are unleashed, which is what we're going to be doing primarily to maximize our damage. But if your pet is unleashed, you take 25% less damage, and so I'll explain why that's really cool for an open world build and how that allows you to be flexible with this build. So lastly, and I'm sorry about being long-winded, this is just a really complicated build, so I wanted to explain all the details. I wanted to explain everything in detail so that you can really understand how it works. Because if you don't understand how this build works, it's not as cool if you're not executing it properly. So we have to understand how all these traits work in order to utilize it properly. So last one's Let Loose. So our Unleash Ambush skills grant boons to nearby allies, which are Quickness and Might, and we refresh Unleashed Power when we swap weapons. So this is a really cool skill. This used to be a more cool skill, I think, when Untamed first got unleashed, but it was way too broken, and they had to change it to something else because it was just completely game breaking. It was like every time you CC, all of your cooldowns go down, and Untamed had like an exceptional amount of CC in its toolkit, and so people were making like solo builds that could do 35k all by themselves with permanent boons, and you could do like a quickness build that there's a build people were doing that was like a Hammer Untamed build where you were doing like 40 something thousand damage in raids without needing boons from anybody else. It was really strange, and so they had to get rid of it because it was just impossible to balance. It was too broken, and so that's why we have this new skill, Let Loose. But this skill is also now very strong, and I'm going to demo why here in just a sec. So we've talked about all the baseline of why we're taking Selly gear so that we can have boon duration, and why we're taking these power weapons. Like I said, because it's more fun. I've tried a lot of Condi builds, and they're not as good. And so now I want to go through and demo the build real quick just to show you, like, this damage is massive, right? Like, power builds and Selly gear should not, like, they don't do this kind of damage. And so I'm just going to demo the build real quick so you can see how high the damage is. And then I'm going to talk about how I'm executing it, because it is really important actually for this build. This is a more complicated build than some of the others I've shared. And so I'm going to go into how to actually play it so that you can get the most out of it when you pick up the build. So real quick, I'm going to spawn a Golem, and then I'm going to demo it, and then we're going to talk about what I'm actually doing to get this damage and why it's working, and then we'll talk about alternative ways to play the build, and we'll talk about all the good things with all these utility skills later, because surprise, the utility skills are all just utility, right? They're all flex skills on the right, so we don't actually have to take anything to make this build function. And so but we'll get more into that later. I'm just going to demo the build real quick. So I'm going to spawn this Golem, and then we'll get started. Alright, so you see pretty high damage there. So we're doing 18-2 on a power build with power weapons, power trait lines, in full Selly gear, we're doing 18-2 on an open world build, which is massive, right? A lot of the other builds that I've shared that are power and that run this Selly setup for survivability are doing maybe like 12, 13, 11, 12, 13, 14. There's a Reaper build that's doing more than that, but it's kind of cheating. This is crazy damage for a build in Selly gear to be doing with an open world setup, and the even crazier thing about it is that it's so tanky. It's just incredibly tanky. So so since I haven't talked about them yet, if we talk about these utility skills, right, the right side of our bar, all of these skills are flex skills. We do not have to take any single one of these to make the build work. And as you saw when I executed this, I didn't have to press any of these. So if we actually use our utility skills as utility, it can become very survivable and very versatile, and we can change these to anything we want in the Ranger's arsenal to get more out of the class. And so like I said, I promised I would do. I wanted to explain how the build's kind of working to get this super high damage, this 18.2, and I've gotten it up to like 18.5. It's crazy. The damage on this is actually crazy with this buff. So this is a super cool build now, and so I just wanted to explain how it's kind of working. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to just swap through your weapons in order to maximize the amount of unleash ambush skills you can use. So to start out the fight, you're going to have your pet unleash, and this is how you should really just be walking around open world anyway, because you're more survivable with the pet unleashed. And so the way you're initiating fights is you're just setting the pet in and just using all of its skills, right? Just use all these unleash skills off cooldown. And then what you're going to do is you're going to swap. So you're going to unleash yourself, use the ambush skill, and then maybe use these skills, use your other weapon skills, and then you're going to immediately, as soon as you can, swap weapons, use the other ambush skill, and then you're going to sit in here and do some sort of rotation, right? Some sort of rotation in your other skill until you get this pop back up, right? This unleash power pop back up, right? So when this pops back up, you want to go in and just use your, again, just spam these F skills in your unleashed pet, switch to yourself, do your unleash, and then swap so that you can get the second unleash ambush on your other weapon set. And so eventually you'll learn how to do this like before it comes up, and you'll swap into this before it comes up so you can immediately hit it and then swap back and forth. And so if you can learn how to just like smoothly get through a rotation on each weapon set and then pop the unleash perfectly off cooldown and then swap to the other weapon set, you'll be doing massive damage, right? And so like even this pull that we just did, where I wasn't trying to do it quickly at all, I was literally just like completely messing around, going super slow, 13.5, right? Already better than some of the other open world builds I've demoed on this channel. Really high damage on this build. This build's super good for a power build. Like, it's crazy. And so next I want to talk about why this build is so cool, in my opinion, and that's because it's actually unlimitedly, like, there's unlimited amounts of changes you can make to the build, and it still functions really well. So one of the things you might have noticed is that this doesn't pass some of my open world tests in terms of like what it has, because this build actually doesn't have protection. And so you might be going, okay, so you have full Selly gear, but you don't have protection, so you're not actually that tanky. And you might be correct, right? So if I went to do this golem again, right, and then let's see. So yeah, that's the right golem. Okay.
Welcome.
And then I put
approach the console and begin combat
one.
practice. If you have any questions, I'm
She's
all
gonna talk.
ears.
So if I toggled pulsing damage on and I put moderately threatening and I come in here and I tried to do a pull on this build, it's actually still pretty tanky, right? Like we're still have natural survivability, but yeah, you might be right that we could struggle with doing this rotation without the protection. But real quick, I actually do just want to demo that, like do an attempt on that real quick. So hold on. So I'm going to show you, like, yes, if you completely ignore everything about the build, you might struggle in a high damage situation, but I'm going to show you why this build actually has incredible survivability and tankiness while still doing a ton of damage if we make the appropriate changes to the build. So respawn, I'm just really quickly going to do like just a partial Golem Pull just to show you like what it's like if we don't utilize any of our utilities and we just try to face tank things without adapting the build. So as you can see, we do start to take a lot of damage, right? We still maintain really good damage output, but we do start to take a lot of incoming damage when we're not using any of our utilities. But I'm going to showcase again how this build is flexible, and so we can do things to mitigate that, and we can actually utilize our utilities to become more survivable on demand, right? Without having to do it innately. So if I remove this golem real quick, and that'll let us reset this fight. So a key thing, right? I haven't been pressing any of these utility skills, and so what I wanted to demo is with this moderate damage pulsing is how we can get survivability out of this build. So the first thing to realize is that we can change some stuff on our bar to get protection uptime. So right, if I change any of these utilities, I can change this to Stone Spirit, right? And Stone Spirit's going to give us pulsing protection. And that's going to be partial protection uptime for us. And then we can also use Protect Me to get protection uptime. And then the third change we can make is we can change our pet to the turtle, the Siege Turtle. And the Siege Turtle Beast skill, Hunker Down, will also give us pulsing protection. And so with these three skills together, we can have access to permanent protection uptime while we fight the golem. And we actually, like, we're going to lose damage from it, but it's actually still pretty powerful. So really quick, I'm going to demo it with this full defensive setup. And I'm going to be using my utilities a little more. I also didn't talk about the heal skill. We're going to be using Healing Spring as well. And so with Healing Spring, right, this will drop the Healing Spring as a trap that triggers when we're taking damage. So it gives us regen, it gives us burst healing, like upfront self-healing, and it cures 2 conditions. And the beauty of this skill is that it's actually a combo field, a water combo field. So if I were to spawn a golem, oh, I didn't hit spawn a golem. All right, enemy spawn. Okay, so if I were to spawn this golem, and I'm in this field taking damage, right? So if I spawn the healing trap, it'll do initial healing, right? This initial 5600, and then apply regen. But what you can also do is, because it spawns a water field and we have all these leap finishers, we can leap finisher all these fields and get healing out of that as well as our base regen. And so this is why this is probably the least flexible of all the utility skills. I actually think Healing Spring is just a lot more powerful than any of the other healing utility you could take. But with that said, I'm going to demo this build again with this Siege Turtle setup. Come to me, Turtle. And show you that with the moderate damage pulsing, we're going to be at full health basically the entire fight as long as we want to. So respawn previous golem, and then I'm going to do a golem pull with the Siege Turtle and show you that it still does massive damage even in a full survivability mode. And then we'll talk a little bit more about even more things you could do to become more survivable, like pressing this forest fortification, but we'll do that in just a second. So real quick, I'm going to do another pull with the Siege Turtle. right? So even if I take off a bunch of different modifiers and buffs, right? We went from a super powerful power pet in the Phoenix pet to this very low damage juvenile siege turtle pet. We also took a damage signet off in order to take protection on this build. And once we did that, though, we were basically at 100% health the entire time with the moderate damage pulsing. And so you can see, right, this actually is a lot of damage, right? So it's ticking for 11. If we add prot, right, tick for 750, right? So now we're taking for 750. If we then, again, now we press Forest Fortification, which gives us 50% damage reduction. Now we're taking 50% less damage from that, so we're 370. And then we can also unleash our pet, and now it's at 282, right? So there's so many things you can do to become more survivable on this build, which is what makes it just a really great open world build, is you have the ability to be flexible, to respond to the situation, and adjust the build accordingly. So there's so many different options. Like I said, one of the first things I did was I changed some of these utility skills, right? So I changed uh, Signet of the Wild to the Stone Spirit. But you can also do a lot of things with your pets. So the default pet I'm taking is this Phoenix because it has a high crit chance, which works well with our trait line here with the Potent Ally. So when the pet crits, that gives us might, and so that helps round out our might. But you have a lot of different options with the pets. The secondary pet that I've been taking that I've been liking is this Rock Gazelle, because the Rock Gazelle has multiple CC skills uh, on its bar, and it's just the tankiest pet, which still does decent damage with a really fast auto attack, and so it works. It also works well with this Potent Ally, not quite as well because it doesn't have as high crit chance. Um, but yeah, and so these are the two pets I take by default. Uh, the Siege Turtle pet is your defensive pet, right? If you need the prot uptime because you're taking too much damage, this is the pet to go to, and you can swap to this. And so you could run multiple pets here, right? You could run both the Phoenix for damage, and you could run the Siege Turtle for defense, and you could swap between them. So if like we were in a fight, if I were to come here in a fight, so I can proc this and then weapons and then a pet swap to the Phoenix and do all my damage stuff. Once that whole pulse procs, right? You don't want to swap too early, but and then by the time that ability that we're using for the protection is up again, we can swap back and use the hunker down again for more protection, right? And that'll help us give ourselves permanent prot and still do damage at the same time. So you can get really creative with your pet usage. Another pet that I like is the tiger, the white tiger from End of Dragons. And so this pet has it also has decent stats. So if I open the pet stat panel, it has high crit chance and it has a decently fast auto attack, which is good for this build. But it also has this beast skill, which gives us Aegis on command, right? So if we wanted to be like super try hard and we wanted to like flex Aegis and just like block an attack, right? We could press that button and have instant Aegis. This works well with we already have utility like this on our bar because we're taking great swords. So we have block as well. So we have counter attack, and that's a block. If we take Stone Spirit, this is also an Aegis on initial cast, right? So there's so many things you can do on this build to be more tanky and to respond to certain situations and change it up. But the go-to I think is just the super passive, super reactive setup where you have Signet of the Wild. You could take Frost Trap here. Frost Trap might actually be more damage. I just if I can avoid it, I like to avoid having utility skills that are part of my rotation just because I'm a skill clicker. But I'm pretty sure Frost Trap might actually be better, might be higher damage. So you could take Frost Trap here and get even higher than that 18.2, 18.5 that I was hitting. Um, but I just take this Signet here. You could also change this to Signet of Stone to make you tankier. If you don't want to worry about activating skills and you just want to be a little tankier, but this isn't as good. If you're gonna take a tank utility over here, you should probably just take Stone Spirit. As far as our other utilities, I'm taking Mutate Conditions because this is a stun break and it changes all of our conditions to Vuln. And so what you can do as a cool combo is like if you get stunned with a bunch of conditions, you can activate this, break the stun, turn all the conditions into Vuln, and then you can activate Healing Spring, and that'll cure all the Vuln stacks on you. And so that's a cool combo to use. I also take Protect Me just because I think the reactive barrier stun break is just really good utility. And I always like having multiple stun breaks on my kit just to make open world play more interesting. And so as you can see, there's so many different things we can do on this build because all of these utility slots are flex. And the build still does a ton of damage. It's still very tanky. And it's super fun to play, right? I think that's the most important thing, is I think there were builds that I was testing that did like almost this much damage, if not a little bit more on the Condi end for Untamed and Soul Beast, but they just weren't very fun in my opinion. And so that's what this build does best. Is this build is the quintessential Ranger build if you want to explore Ranger completely, mess with all the pets, learn how to play different classes, learn how to use this more nuanced Unleash mechanic, this ambush mechanic, which will help you play other classes in the future like Thief and Mirage. And so lastly, I just wanted to demo like this in open world and just show you like how it works and how we can be flexible in the open world scenario too. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to go do a hero point challenge, Heart of Thorns hero point challenge, so that I can just demo the build in open world and just show you how cool it is in a real encounter, right? It's not just, it doesn't just work really cool and do cool things on the Golem, it does cool things in real life. So real quick, I'm going to load up the open world and we're going to do that. So I'm actually going to do the mushroom one because I think the mushroom one really showcases all the reactive utility you can use on this build while still doing lots of damage. And I think this is the best one to demo this on because I think it really drives home the point of the utility that you have, just the vast amount of utility you have when you play this build. And so we're going to do the mushroom. I'm going to do it like a kind of try-hard, sweaty run first, and then we can do a few other attempts just to showcase how you can be flexible and adjust the build how you need it to deal with the content in the way you want. So summon the mushroom. We're just going to use the stab. And I canceled my unleash there, which is not good. And missed some skills, but it's okay. We're going to dodge that. Break. Dodge that one. Oops. Right, and so you see we have a lot of different tools. We really didn't take any damage while we were doing that, even though we don't have protection set up. So I'm going to do it a little slower this time and just showcase how you can be more reactive. Use your utilities to break stuns, and you saw me do that a little bit. And you saw me use Forest Fortification to get that initial upfront stability so that I don't have to deal with a lot of the things the mushroom's doing. But we can be more reactive here if we wanted. So right, so I got CC'd, so I can break that. Got CC'd again, so I can break that. And another cool thing about being on Ranger is that sometimes your pet gets targeted instead of you, which is super nice. You could dodge this, right? So using my dodges. Use stun break again. Use stability, right? There's just so many things you could do And if you try to do this, so look, and then I use my greatsword block there. We've got some other people helping out here, which is fine. That happens in open world. And so even if you're not playing it super optimally, you can still be aware of what's going on in your surroundings and react accordingly, right? So I was playing it really poorly on purpose there, just to be like, look, like even if you're not playing this build fast, you could still get a lot out of it. And then we can even, right, if let's say we're just like really struggling, right, with some content. So like one of the hero point challenges that this build doesn't do as well on is this one, this chalk one over here. So I'm gonna do that one real quick. But if we change to our more supportive setup, right, this more defensive setup, and we do this chalk one, it becomes pretty easy. But this one's kind of weird because the chalk puts an AoE that kind of kills your pet pretty fast, and so this one can be kind of hard to do on this build anyway. So we'll see how it goes. It should be good. I tried this. You can still do it on this build. It's still perfectly fine, even on the other variant of this. See our pet's dead, so we have to swap to the other one, which is a bit unfortunate. I think it's just I don't know why the pet takes so much damage on this fight. I think it's just because it camps in the AoE and it has to base tank more stuff than we do. Leash skill anytime. Okay. But as you can see, we're just really survivable. We have lots of ways we can react to this fight, to do different things. And again, you see my pet's dead again. I don't know why the pet dies in this room. It's why I didn't want to do this one as the main demo, but we're super tanky. And so we do have a lot of options, even on harder encounters like this, right? So even without our pet helping us almost at all, we can still solo that fight and stay alive the whole time on a power build. But you just have a lot of options on this build, right? Like I said, you can get this more defensive setup. You can be flexible with your pets. I still think this the Phoenix pet is the best one, just because it's high crit chance, high power, and it has a fast enough auto attack, to where it works really well to give us might with potent ally. But there's lots of different ranger pets you can use depending on the situation. And lots of different utilities you could use over here. You could even like, oh wow, you could do that. Like you could use multiple damage utility skills. Wow, we could take Signet of the Wild. We could also take Frost Trap, and then we could take something like, I don't know. We could take like take Exploding Spores, right? So we could have it fully damaged up over here to just maximize our damage. Maybe we take Entangle as well or something. Maybe take Spirit of Nature so we can clutch res our friends out in the open world. Maybe we take Perilous Gift as our healing skill so that we can just completely ignore damage for a few seconds or something. I really don't like that option. I think Healing Springs is broken. But yeah, you just have so many different things you can do on this build. Like I showed, it does super high damage. It's super tanky. It's very fun. You have all these movement skills on the greatsword and the sword that you can use. You have good CC. You can even go and you can change some things up in the trait lines as needed, right? We were dodging a lot in that fight I just showed. If we feel like we're not caring about damage, we just want survivability, we can take Primal Reflexes, and that means if we successfully evade, we get Vigor, which helps us dodge more. If we're having trouble with an enemy that has a lot of self boons, like self prot, or like gets too strong with a bunch of self might or something, you can take Corrupting Vines, and that'll let your ranger pet strip with the 2 skill. Right, you just have so many different options, and and again, it's just a fun build. It's got permanent quickness, permanent 25 might, permanent fury. You can have access to permanent protection if you want. It's power build, so it's not gonna have slow ramp in the open world. It's gonna do burst damage quickly. There's just so many things to love about this build. It's really such a great build. I really love this build. I'm so glad that they buffed Greatsword to make this build viable and a possible option. I mean, it probably would have worked before, but it's just really strong now. This is such a great build. This is, if you're going to play Ranger in open world, this is the build you should play. It's super flexible, and like, you can, even if you're not like afraid of being bored with Condi damage, the crazy thing about this build is you don't have to change the gear at all. You don't have to change like the stats you're selecting at all. You could literally take these weapons, and you could pick from any weapon in the catalog of Ranger. You could pick any weapon, any utility skill. You could even take any of the trait lines up here, right? Any of these core trait lines. You could pick any of them and run with this build and have a good time. So this is just the way I think is the most fun, which is the sword, the axe, and the greatsword. But there's so many different ways to play this build, and this is just the one I think is the most fun. So, but that's like too woke, right? Like too woke, like actually flexing everything about your build in the open world and playing however you want and it being good. Wow, that's way too broken. You know, we can't do that. So this is the build I decided to demo, this version of it. But yeah, so it's really strong build, really great. If like, this build is so good, like it's so powerful, it's so fun. This is like the dream way to play a pet class in Guild Wars 2, right? This is the Ranger build they tell you not to worry about, right? This is like, she's that girl, you know. So if you want to pick up Untamed, if you want to pick up Ranger, this is the build to do. It's super good. Hopefully I explained all the different ways you can flex stuff on this build appropriately, and don't be afraid to read tooltips and try it out yourself. There's so many cool things about this build, and it's super fun. It'll work for you even if you aren't very good at all the mechanics and all the different nuances of it. It'll still do decent damage because it does so much damage when you actually learn it full out. And so yeah, so this is Untamed Ranger power build. Super fun. This is such a good build. I'm so glad there's a Ranger build I can finally share. I was trying so hard to find one that was fun enough to share, and I'm so glad that this one exists. So yeah, so anyway, it's me, Mandala. Sorry this was a super long video, but I was just really excited about this build and I wanted to get it out there. So anyway, Open World Ranger, see you later, bye!